Larry teaches in the school that owners spend 1% of their time recruiting and 99% of their time fixing their recruiting mistakes. When we first meet a contractor, they're so inundated with their day-to-day role in their business that they've never taken the time to even consider, what is it that I want? What is it that I envision? And you're right, they've never thought about that question. But, when they do think about it, and as they go through the school, it's a wow, right, experience for them. I didn't know I had this inside of me, and I'm grateful now that I got to put it on paper. I got to create a list of who I want to become as a leader. And when they write that list, it says I will be. And a couple years later, it becomes I am. The entrepreneur spends the first part of their career being desperately underpaid, so that if they get it right, they can be wildly overpaid. You may not be making a lot of money early on, but if you do the right things and you invest into people the best that you can, their growth is going to compound, and it's going to come back to you tenfold. And you might earn 10 years worth of income in 1 year later on, 20 years worth of income in 1 year later on. And I know you've seen it, Ed, in your own journey through the experience. Early on, I'm sure you weren't, turning over millions of dollars in profit, but as you've progressed and as you've poured into other people and given them opportunities, you've seen the great result of compounding interest, even through people. Good, better, best, never let it rest until good is better and better is best. Excellence requires continuous work. You're never going to achieve, success as a destination, right? It's a continuous journey.
Are you stuck in that $3 to $10 million year-over-year revenue? Roofs in a Box is your all-in-one growth partner for modern construction companies. They combine AI, virtual staffing, and CRM solutions to help streamline operations. Replace your high fixed overhead with cost-effective systems and support. They empower you to run a smarter, leaner business, freeing up capital where it matters most. Mention this ad to save 10% on your next Roofs in a Box purchase. This episode of Pain Points is brought to you by Ringba. If your business relies on phone calls, you need to be working with them. Their technology will help you get the most money out of your marketing campaigns. Their call exchange, Ringba X, can deliver inbounds on demand to help grow your customer base. Now, I want to be transparent. Ringba and Adam did pay me to deliver that message, but I'm also a customer, and I've watched them help dozens of companies become more successful over the years. So if you sell a product or service over the phone, I guarantee a moment with their team will be worth it. All right, man. Welcome to Pain Points, where real pain equals real growth. Today we got Johnny Neal. He's a business leader, educator, growth strategist, works with a company called Contractor Nation, where he helps home service contractors build stronger companies through proven systems, leadership, training. And he's just passionate about developing people as businesses. He's dedicated to equipping contractors to create profitable, scalable companies to improve lives. His mission is rooted in leadership, personal growth, and helping entrepreneurs build businesses that will lasting impacts on their families and loved ones. So welcome, Johnny. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, grateful to be here and to share with all those tuning in, listening, and watching around the world.
Nice. So I think just let's get started. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you do and what your company does, and then I have quite a few questions already lined up if it goes that way or not.
Yeah. So Contractor Nation was developed by now entrepreneurial billionaire contractor Larry Janeski. And Larry early on in his career found that doing all the work, wearing all the hats was not a winning strategy, right? And so he was able to learn from others, mentors, and really take a step back and look at where he is today and, benchmark that and begin to put other people in place in different departments and then attach KPIs to those departments to where the business could run without him. And now today, Contractor Nation serves over 600 dealers around the US and Canada. And it's a network that continues to grow, and we have 9 different brands in the network. But what Larry, I think his legacy play was developing the education side for these contractors that became dealers, so that they have a model of excellence in their business that they can emulate, and that Larry showed to be, the right path forward. So
Is there a certain size companies that you specialize with? Is there a certain size in revenue that you guys kind of come in as kind of helping entrepreneurs, or kind of a sweet spot?
Yeah, the idea behind, a size of a company being able to learn and to join a network, there's not really a certain revenue size that anyone can learn. You could be starting out, in your career path even, and learn things that are valuable that will lend to your career, whether you're an entrepreneur or a manager in a trades business or thinking about it. And over the years, that's, really where we've turned our focus, is to share, just this knowledge that can help them get ahead. And a couple of years ago, Larry turned 60 years old and said, "Hey, I want to open up the school of entrepreneurship to everyone who wants to learn." And that was an incredible, offer that he was able to make.
Yeah, it's interesting with business owners, because I feel like when you're a smaller business and you first get into business for yourself, I feel like sometimes people have their back against the wall. They have a trade. They feel like they can kind of step in and maybe handle something. But what happens is they kind of get to this point where they actually have a business, right? They never thought they were going to get there. They thought that they're just making whatever they're making, and then all of a sudden they need to replicate themselves. They need to hire. They need to grow. And so what's great, if people can be forward thinking, they can probably use your skills and services up front to kind of maybe help collapse timeframes for some of the growing pains that they have to do. But for me, I think most of the time people reach me is when they kind of get to this point of 2 to 5 million, and they either can't grow or they don't necessarily have systems and processes. They are the company, so they kind of get to this phase of growth where they're just like, how do I get past this? Can't get out of my own way. Is that kind of what you feel for the most part you guys are receiving, or do you feel like it's a combination of inspiring versus actual entrepreneurs?
Yeah, those are good, places to think about. I mean, most contractors, if you asked them, what does the future look like, or what do they want, they would start by saying, well, if I had a $5 million company, $10 million company, $20 million company, then I could do what those company leaders do, and I could become that leader that, leads that kind of company. But where we start is, first you have to become the leader of an organization that can have the right people in place, that can have the many trucks rolling out for service, and that's really the doing part. And then they'll have the business that they dreamt of. But it's got to be do have, and not the reverse of that, right? And so yes, we focus on the leader first, and it's so important that they work on themselves and that they grow from, just, yes, experience matters, but you're never going to live long enough to learn it all yourself, right? And so learning from someone who's done it, who's still doing it, is a much faster path forward to achieving the results that you say you want.
Yeah, I call it collapsing timeframes, right? It's somebody that's done it versus fumbling in the dark and try to figure it out yourself. So when you first get a business owner on the phone, or an entrepreneur, is it walk me through like your onboarding process, like what kind of needs assessment, how do you identify where they're at on their journey? Obviously, I always say businesses fail for 2 reasons: process or people. And most companies aren't large enough to have the processes to put people in a position to succeed. So when you're doing your first like forensics, or meeting somebody on the phone, let's say I'm John Doe and I say, "Hey, I have a roofing company. Can you kind of walk me through your process to kind of identify where I'm at?" And then second question to that is, what is the most common struggle points do you feel for most entrepreneurs that reach out to you guys? So I know there's two loaded questions, but if you can kind of touch on that.
Well, working with so many contractors around the country and having those conversations, it really comes down to first things first. We have to get clear, and they need to get, clear on where they are today. And the best time to do an audit or a benchmark audit, in our case, which is where we start, is at the beginning of a transition, the beginning of, where you say, I want to change, I want to get better, right? Well, if you don't know where you're at today, you don't know if you're progressing or where that weakness is, where that, struggle is in your business. And so we try to identify just through some questions and answers that, we go through together, where is the weakest link in the business? Is it you as the leader? Is it your accounting, your numbers, the financials? Maybe it's a department that you're still heading up. If you're an owner and you're sending out the crews, right? That's something that should be delegated over to someone else, but with guardrails and with instruction and training, right? Training is so important, and it takes a lot of capital and time to develop training. But when we can have a conversation with an owner and share with them, this curriculum of excellence, it's not just for them, it's for their management team as well. And when you give a manager an education, they begin to get new results for you in the business, and then you begin to see growth through the learning that they're discovering, and then what they're implementing from that training. So I think that carries the first question is how do we understand the people that we're working with? It starts with a benchmarking audit that is really valuable to both sides for us to help lead them and get them that information that they need where they're weakest. And
you mentioned a lot of pain points, as far as you mentioned financial blindness. So do you know the numbers? Do you understand P&Ls and cash flow and whatnot? You said project managers. You said like for them acting as production managers, doing the ordering, the materials or whatever. Too many seats, what I call too many seats on the bus. And then you also talked about hiring and training, right? Those are paramount, right? And so are those the top three things that to piggyback on the second question, that you kind of the biggest pain points that you see from entrepreneurs? Or
but I would also add that a lot of contractors in the marketplace, they're seeing, all these buyouts and, opportunities to sell their company and get a cash fall, right? And maybe retire or, go do something else that they're passionate about. And, part of that is systems, it's financials, and it's people. Nobody can purchase your business if it all lives in your head. And so when we think about the pain of that, they want to, sell, but they can't. And a lot of times they just get turned away, right? And then, what are we going to do with our business? Or, for instance, I had a conversation recently about a son of a contractor, and the contractor was a painter, and his wife did all the inside work, and he did all of the crews and the management and the jobs and all of that, and the customers and the sales. And dad passed away. Well, now the family's left with a mess that they can't, just bring someone in and say, hey, can you help? They can't just, fix it. Mom doesn't know the outside part. She knows the inside part, but the outside part falls apart as dad passed away. And, mom's kind of stuck with nothing. And it's something we don't think about enough as contractors is what is the end goal? Where do I want to go? What do I want to see in the future? And we teach these students in our school that you have to get clear on what it is that you want and who it is you want to become. And what does that dream look like, right? And so that's one of our foundational classes in the school.
I love that question, because before I mentor guys or I partner with guys, a lot of the young entrepreneurs that I play with, I always ask them day one is what's your number? And the reason I ask that, because my number is very different, right? I'm talking in the tens or hundreds of millions. They're talking maybe in their first few, because they're young entrepreneurs. And the reason I say that, because if their number is, let's just say, $1 million for math's sake, you need to design a company that that has that $1 million exit, right? Because what's your retirement plan? Roofing and contracting is one of those jobs that pay now, pay later, but you got to have a sustainable model, right? So I love that because it allows most entrepreneurs really, they just back against the wall, need to do something. They never started with the end in mind. And then what happens? They get to this point, then you're posing questions that when I ask entrepreneurs that, they have no idea. They're just thinking that, they're just hustling, grinding. They're good at their craft, but that's about as far as any of them have gotten. And so a lot of the questions you're asking, I ask all the time in different verbiage, but it's loaded, right? If you don't have that in mind, then how are you going to create something to get there? So I love it, man. There's very deep, thought-provoking questions. Do you feel like most of the entrepreneurs, when you educate them on that level, that they have the answer? Or do you feel like you're posing it for the first time and then, just getting the creative juices flowing?
Yeah, posing it for the first time, I would say getting the thoughts right. The idea is to change their thinking, right? When we first meet a contractor, they're so inundated with their day-to-day role in their business that they've never taken the time to even consider, what is it that I want? What is it that I envision? And you're right, they've never thought about that question. But, when they do think about it, and as they go through the school, it's a wow, right, experience for them. I didn't know I had this inside of me, and I'm grateful now that I got to put it on paper. I got to create a list of who I want to become as a leader. And when they write that list, it says I will be. And a couple years later, it becomes I am, right? Or I do now versus I will. And that transition is a joyful experience for them. And it's a eye-opening experience that they say, this is possible, and they see it in themselves. And that's where we see a lot of that growth. And then, the return to us is the joy in seeing someone grow and get out of that place where they were.
That shift is actually pretty miraculous when they start thinking as a business owner versus business operator, right? And it's like they never even thought that it was even possible because they're so their normacy or their reality is the only normal thing they know, right? They can't see outside, they can't see the forest of the trees. So that shift is awesome. That's great that you guys are able to do that. So you guys have done a huge amount of growth in a short amount of time. How have you made? How did you establish a name? And then two, how have you grown so quickly?
Yeah, Contractor Nation evolved from Larry going out and getting patents for products that he believed could be better than what the manufacturers in the marketplace were creating. And then he said, we can build brands around these that serve every contractor out there, with a ladder. And what he was able to do is transfer this knowledge and these operating systems for every key part of the business, from marketing to appointment center to sales to production, accounting, recruiting, the whole nine, and say, if you model this, then you're essentially doing what the big companies are doing, and you're going to look like a bigger company than you are, which is okay, right? It's okay to look and become famous through your branding, right? Through your, the way that you serve your customer, and every customer should walk away with the experience of wow, right? And you've gone above and beyond their expectations in pursuit. But to dive a little deeper in how we've grown so quickly, it hasn't been a quick process. It's been over 35 years that Larry's been developing dealers, and these dealers, some of them have been with him for 35 years, and they're still coming online. And when you go to an event like CN Live, which is our national contractor dealer conference in Hartford, Connecticut, and you meet the owners of these companies who just bolted on one of the brands from Contractor Nation, and they tell you, I became a multimillionaire because I followed the steps that Larry put in place for me. It's miraculous to see how many people attribute that back, just to someone sharing and caring and loving, what they do and who they are and who they get to work with every day, and the knowledge they get to pass to them, to instill in their teams and in their business and in their own lives.
No, I love that. So you brought up a couple of different pain points, and we'll see where this goes. But you brought up, I'll bring up one of my pain points across my companies, and so let's just say recruiting. So tell me some of the secret sauce, if you may, or because none of it's really secret sauce. That's the other thing that's really right. It's just about, do you have this set up? But let's talk about recruiting, because I know that's one of the biggest struggles for me to hire hunters, or if you're storm versus retail, and there's two different sales styles for both. Right, it's different when insurance is paying for something versus retail, good, better, best options. Right, it's very different sales cycle, as well as door knockers versus online. So, can you kind of just walk me through kind of some of the best practices in the recruiting efforts?
Yeah. So with recruiting, it's hell yes or no, right? Yeah. And you can't teach character, you can't teach integrity, but what you can look for is attitude. You can look for enthusiasm, right? If you're looking for a salesperson, are they going to do things right? Are they going to learn your sales system? And if you don't have a sales system, then everybody's flying off the cuff of their pants. They're all saying different things. Well, that doesn't create uniformity in the business, and it can't set the expectation for the market to have an expectation of what you're going to do when you show up. But when you have everybody in line and you have your management team who gets to veto that next hire, and that's in their court as well. And you go through these processes of, hey, we want to take this applicant and we want them to do a task for homework and see if they're willing to do it. Or when they show up on that first call, did they do any research on our company? That's one of the first questions that you should ask is, what do you know about us? Right? And if they took no time to look up your company or to see what you offer or to understand your offering to the market, then they're probably not the right fit. But Larry teaches in the school that owners spend 1% of their time recruiting and 99% of their time fixing their recruiting mistakes. Right? And so you gotta look backwards and see, and say another lesson, which is knowing what I now know. Would I do it again? Would I hire this person again? And you should always constantly be recruiting and have that bench full, right, of new candidates that you're warming up, because you never know. When somebody's not going to work out anymore, you got to let them go. Well, if you let go of your number one person in a department or in a role, and you don't have anybody to back it up to come in and take their place, you're starting all over, right? Every time that you lose someone.
It's an interesting concept, because most business owners in like the trades, at least, they're craftsmen, right? They're artists. If they're remodel, if they're construction, they work with their hands. They know not to cut corners. They know that they get in the business because no one's going to do it as good as them. It's kind of a common parallel. Not everybody, but it's a common parallel. But yet, even with that mindset, they don't have it in other facets what they don't know, like recruiting, like you just said. Like it'd be the equivalent, and I don't know why I never put this together. Hearing you just kind of connect the dots, is if they would hire the same way they treat their craft, they would put the work in to make sure it's done right up front, versus backpedal and try to fix all the mistakes after the fact. And so the philosophy is actually, am I applying this principle in all other facets of my business? Most businesses are three-legged stool: finance, supply, which is ops, and demand, which is sales, right? And if you can put it in all three facets, then you have a successful company. But most business owners, frankly, are good at one of them, if maybe two, right? And good is a stretch, right? Because they never got the training. They just kind of became an entrepreneur one day. Interesting. So let's piggyback it off to, and I love the questions of, have you done research? Even for this podcast, right? I've talked to you before at length, and I still looked up your website. I still looked at questions. I still looked at who and what you did, and looked at profiles, and just try to even for the demo, right? For the introduction, I have to do my research, and like people just don't take the time. And this is supposed to be a career, and have they even at minimal take the? I love that question. So let's talk about marketing now, because I think this is another big pain point and this is my background. I'm huge on marketing. Most of the companies I own, I have a marketing arm in that vertical. But what are some of the struggles that you see with entrepreneurs in marketing? And once again, what's your experience around educating people on this to copy, paste, repeat kind of model or workflow?
Sure. So you mentioned the difference between insurance and retail. Two totally different markets, two totally different game plans are required to capitalize and take that market share from the competition, right? But one of the biggest things that are overlooked is branding. And, branding is inclusive of having a memorable tagline, having a memorable name to begin with. And, how are you displaying that and how are you showcasing that in the marketplace, right? If it's Jay's Roofing, who's going to remember that, right? Versus, a different name with an incredible tagline that they remember, or a jingle or something like that, which was really popular back in the 90s. But if we go back in history, at the early part of contracting, if somebody said you have to have marketing in your business, contractors would laugh in your face. They're like, we're not corporate. We're not a big corporate company like Nike or somebody else. Marketing has become so essential in the place where you have to be seen, right? And impressions matter. Right? Impressions come by way of direct mail. They come by way of radio, not so much TV anymore with the platforms, but you can still get on, ads on Spotify or Pandora or, these other platforms, YouTube, right? Everybody's consuming content. So if you can get in front of them and they see you, they remember you, they see your trucks in the field, your lettering is up high. It says exactly what you do and how to contact you. You're going to be in a much better place. And a lot of times I'll go out and visit these contractors and I'll call them out. I'll say, hey, come out to your parking lot. Let's look at your trucks and see what's happening when you place a car in front of them, or beside them. Can anybody tell what you do? And a lot of times it's no, right? And so you gotta be memorable in contrasting colors and some of those things, but you can hire experts today, even, that understand these principles, that go into marketing, and you get a lot further ahead, even on, leveraging something like Fiverr, right? Where you can have an outsourced person who's done this for many other companies, who's done a good job. You give them your vision and they can turn that into something real that now you can print and, apply to your assets in your business.
No, I love that. I also love the fact let's break it into two other marketings besides branding, because I think you're right. The creative marketing and how the society sees you, and are you on all social channels? Are you represented? Do people know who and what you are? Clear and concise. There's no misconception about what your niche is in the industry, like clearly defined. But so let's talk about both. Let's talk about Storm and let's talk about retail. What are some of the best? I know it varies by markets and by media type. I could do the same ad in South Dakota and a different ad in Tucson, and one will kill and the next one won't, right? So it's always got to have new creative, new content, new whatnot, and constantly changing and evolving. But both markets, both retail and storm chasing, what are some of the best practices and maybe some of the best cost per acquisition kind of marketing that you've seen out there?
Yeah. That's a good point. And I would say another thing to add to that is sales differentiation, right? You have to have something that differentiates you from the competition, right? So you look at some of the big companies and it might be their warranty, right? They're not depending on the manufacturer and saying, hey, the manufacturer is going to, put a 50-year warranty on this, which everybody these days knows it doesn't hold up. But the company's taking that risk and they're saying, hey, we're going to put our own warranty on this and we're going to back it up for 50 years. If you have anything, any leaks or anything like that, essentially we own the roof that's on your house, unless you sell or, you're outside the warranty time. But, talking about insurance, some of the best companies out there still go door to door, but they're not just going door to door and saying, hey, we're the best, because you see a line down the driveway of everyone saying that they're the best, right? What is it that makes you the best? You have to ask great questions at the door, things that other people aren't asking, right? When's the last time has anybody taken a look at your roof yet? Well, yeah, okay. Who was it? Was it an insurance company or was it a contractor? Oh, it was a contractor. Okay, great. What did they say? Or insurance company, what did they say? Right. And now that you're getting information from them, but you're also leading them in a direction to get yourself in a position to look like the expert, right? The specialist that can help them and serve them versus trying to push them. You're pulling them. And I believe, still customer acquisition cost on that is much lower in a storm setting because you're not going to launch ads fast enough and get seen fast enough in a market that just got hit by a hailstorm. So you got to have boots on the ground and they got to look great, right? Presentation is everything. Enthusiasm is everything, but they should be asking the right questions and they should be going, and doing the job well. But they should also be rewarded for that and recognized for that as well. Your canvasser should not be seen as the lowest person on the totem pole when they're the first person on the front lines and they're putting in the sweat equity to get your business in front of somebody. They should be recognized and awarded for their efforts and also compensated for their efforts. So you can look at, what are you spending on ads, right? Or on any marketing and evaluate, okay, this is how much we can spend for an ad to acquire a customer, or this is how much we can spend on a canvasser to acquire a customer, right? And if that canvasser what is their job? Their job's to set an appointment that your salesperson can sit down with. And if they meet that criteria, they should be paid and out of the way, right? It shouldn't be tied to sales. If a salesperson goes out and closes it, you get $100 spent. No, right? Their job is not to sell it. It's to generate that lead and that opportunity.
Right.
Period.
No, so you brought up some good points, and we do both. We do canvassing on the sales, on the actually retail and storm chasing, but we also do phone calls as well because you can go through a lot more doors as set appointments as well. So you brought up the storm, which I love. I feel like I don't like waiting on God to do its thing to have a sustainable business model, right?
Uh-oh.
It's not a forecast on it to say, hey, if I'm going to get 3-inch hail, I know like in the Midwest, I have some cities that haven't got a hailstorm in like three years.
Mm-hmm.
So if I waited on God to do His work, I'd be out of business. So let's shift over to retail. What are some of the best practices that you've seen on the retail marketing side?
Yeah, and we would absolutely agree with you that it's not sustainable, right? Same as like working under a GC. Not sustainable. You're waiting to get paid. Insurance companies are just clawing at trying to keep you not paid, right? So that you do go out of business. And to shift to retail, it's got to be like you got to look at your all your numbers, and you have to understand how much can I allocate of my business to marketing, right? And you have to divide that between different channels. And as you do that, you start to test, right? It's great to experiment. And I think a lot of people don't consider the value in experimentation and seeing and analyzing the results of, hey, if we do this and we do this, what is the return that we're getting? What's the impact that it's having on our business? How many leads is this generating and at what cost? And where can we continue to push more into what's working and extract, more opportunities from that place? And that keeps
marketing. Oh, I'm sorry. I treat marketing as an R&D for new channels, right? Like you said, like know what it means to win. What's this going to cost? What does it mean to win? What's break even? And when you test and you go in, I do calculated risk still when it's a new marketing method. But yeah, I think so many small business owners, and the problem is I think they live and die by every lead. And the mindset is you have to test, you have to spend, you have to continue to grow and evolve. And if you don't have that built into your budget, know the numbers, and also, like I said, what does it mean to succeed? Because some people may say, hey, I got 10 leads and only got 2 appointments. Well, if it cost $1,000 and I sold a $30,000 roof, my cost of acquisition was, nominal compared to the spend, right? And as long as I'm within that percentage, what's my pain point, right? What's my threshold? Is it a 10% ad ratio? Is it a 20%? Is it 15% ad spend? Know the numbers. What's built in? What's the commission plans? What can I spend on this lead to make it successful? And I think most people don't go in like that. They just start thinking of CAC or which CAC is actually, I like the number, but I think it's irrelevant. I think ad ratio is much more relevant as far as marketing, because it's how much revenue did I actually generate from this? If I got a $300 CAC, but 80% of my jobs are repair, versus $1,000 CAC, but now I'm getting replacements. I take replacements all day, every day. But anyways, it's interesting. All right, so you got my mind.
And I would say repairs are also a marketing channel, right?
It is.
If you're not calling those repairs back, you were out there, you did the repair, you know how much time they have left on their roof. If you're not calling that person back, in a considerable amount of time, and always marketing to that person, somebody else is getting that full roof replacement at some point, and you made $500 on a repair.
Yeah, and this is just a Band-Aid, because it's like an AC unit, right? It's like the thing's gonna, if it's 15 years and you replace the fan, year 2 or 3, it's gonna need a whole replacement. It's a Band-Aid. It's your job to be front of mind, right? It's are you following up? Do you have emails? Do you follow up like a year later, 6 months later, to say, hey, is everything fine? Yeah, what's your follow-up cadences? I love it, man. So you got my mind going. So the last piece, and then we will segue into this, is like, let's talk about finance, knowing the numbers. Because I feel like a lot of people, even on a P&L, like you brought up, insurance versus retail usually within a couple of weeks is the DSO at most, and then for the storm, it could be anywhere from like 60 to 120 days, if not more, depending on what kind of jobs you're doing, to get the full payment in. Can you kind of just talk about how you guys mentor, for either fractional CFO or accounting, or even a chart of accounts? I've seen people's chart of accounts that aren't, I can't even tell they're a roofing company, and it's so kind of just consulting an entrepreneur to even understand the numbers.
Yeah, and we say in order to set things right, you have to see things right. Looking at a P&L is like looking at the history books or looking out the rear view, right? It's not looking through the windshield. How can you understand the windshield? Well, there's some metrics that we teach in the school that help an owner to see it, right? Your accountant is going to give you a P&L, and you're going to look at the top line. You might look at the bottom line. You might look at a couple figures in between, but it's not telling you what's happening in the business, and it's not showing you where you can make adjustments and find, a new avenue that you can focus on, that you can get 1% better or 10% better at this one metric, and how much impact it's going to have at raising that top line and bottom line together. So, we talk about the spread, right? And when you look at your business, you have a couple different things that you want to always be clear on. And you can employ someone in your business as an accounting person to play offense and defense for you. And with the spread, it's your receivables minus your payables, right? And that equals your spread. So if you understand how much money, or cash plus receivables minus payables, how much cash do I have today? What are my receivables coming in, and how much do I have to pay out? That's going to give you a number that you can track over time. You can do that monthly. You can do it twice a month if there's, the business isn't working right now, and you can begin to track that. And if you track that and you see that, setting things right becomes easier because you're seeing things right in the beginning. And then
we call it a scorecard, and we track AR versus AP, right? And we do it weekly. And it's really, we don't talk about it every week unless the discrepancy or the numbers start shifting, but we can see a week over week trend. But because I think most people become Excellionaires, right? And they look at, these are all the jobs I've done, but they're not paying attention to the payables, right? And it's and so the thing is, you got to understand accrual versus cash, and when's the cash being recognized, but also what's the future? Like you said, I love that analogy. Well, are you trending the right direction for the future? If not, then I got to start making decisions today to impact it. I love that, man. And so I would say almost all the young entrepreneurs that I talk to, this is probably one of their weakest things that I've seen for most, at least with sales and recruiting. For the most part, they can teach, may not have a process yet, but they can at least teach somebody how to sell while they're doing the production or the project management. But I think finance, man, I think this is just one of those things that unless you have a CPA background, it's let the professionals do it, right? They're going to they're going to collapse time frames. And like, so someone like your company that has done it, seen it across hundreds of different companies, you'd be able to give a light on it that probably they wouldn't be able to see naturally, man. It's like, this is huge. I think every company that doesn't know their numbers are just destined for failure.
Yeah, there's one thing I'd like to add to that. As a business owner, you start your business and there's no playbook. There's nothing that you can model, and no one gave you anything as an idea of what you should be looking at, what you should be doing, what you should be focused on in order to grow at all. And so a lot of it happens by luck. A lot of it happens by chance, just by coming upon, finding yourself, oh, wow, this worked. Okay, great. Let's instill that as a process. But if you continue running that same process and it's the wrong thing to be doing, you're compounding your problems. And, we look at, new entrants into this marketplace coming from the corporate world, coming from trade schools, right? Trade school taught you how to work with your hand. Well, we know internally as an organization and as an educator that if we can teach you to work with your mind and your heart and your voice, you're going to be a lot better off as you take this path to entrepreneurship and growing a business and, really seeing it through in a much easier way.
Love it. Love it. Well, two more things, I guess. What's your biggest pearl of wisdom? I know you've probably had a lot of great mentors and teachers along the line. Like, what are some of the philosophies or belief systems or phrases that, were the most impactful in your career and help mold you into who you are today?
Yeah, one of them was shared with me by one of my great mentors. Good, better, best, never let it rest until good is better and better is best. Excellence requires continuous work. You're never going to achieve, success as a destination, right? It's a continuous journey. And if you pour that into your team, if your team lives by that and you live by that personally, you can only get better. And, I think that's one of the major ones that have kept me going. And inspired every single day to get up and do all that I can to serve others, right? And of course, Zig Ziglar's line: help enough people get what they want, and you'll get what you want. It's the servant leadership and the servant's heart to help other people, and it's got to be people in your organization too. If you got to empower other people and give them the autonomy, give them the freedom to make mistakes, right? We learn from those mistakes. How you carry yourself in the business, right? Walking through the business, do you have a bad attitude? Are you allowing other people to have that bad attitude in your business? It's just a poison in your business, and it will spread until people just walk away and say, I'm not going to have any more of this, right? And I'm not going to be here. Another thing is, Larry, of course, is one of my great mentors. And he says the entrepreneur spends the first part of their career being desperately underpaid so that if they get it right, they can be wildly overpaid. You may not be making a lot of money early on, but if you do the right things and you invest into people the best that you can, their growth is going to compound and it's going to come back to you tenfold. And you might earn 10 years worth of income in 1 year later on, 20 years worth of income in 1 year later on. And I know you've seen it, Ed, in your own journey through the experience. Early on, I'm sure you weren't, turning over millions of dollars in profit, but as you've progressed and as you've poured into other people and given them opportunities, you've seen the great result of compounding interest even through people.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest struggles as an entrepreneur, especially like if they're using it like the nearsightedness. If it's not immediate results, it's like I said, it's the end in mind. Is this the right person? Are they willing to invest in? Is this? But it's also the thing of like using a company like yours, like I said, to help collapse the timeframes. It's like it's expensive to learn on your own. It's expensive not to take the wisdom of somebody else to help navigate the certain low spots ahead, right? And you mentioned so much on this. So I guess last but not least, I always end with this is kind of a shameless plug. How do people find you? Who's your ideal client? Who do you want to reach out to? And who's your target audience?
Yeah, so any contractor, any trade, we can help serve them. Our school, can add value to any business owner, any manager, right? We actually teach the fundamentals of leadership and management in the school. Now, if they're an existing contractor, they can go to discoversoe.com. And we've recently developed a new program called the Trades Leadership Program for the next generation. And what we're doing and what we believe is that we can teach younger people all these principles earlier on, and they're going to be able to define and set in themselves on a path to being able to enter the trades in a management role, a junior management role, even while they learn, they can be earning as a junior manager, and they can be applying what they're learning into the business and helping them get the business get a better result. And obviously that in return helps them. For, any young person who thinks that the trades is just a dirty job, I'll tell you that most successful people in the trades are managers and owners, right? They're earning great livings. They're building great relationships and friendships that last a lifetime. They get to go on great trips. They get to do all these, fun things, but, they're effectively just becoming a better version of their earlier self. So if we can push that information down to them earlier, they're going to be a lot further ahead than their peers who maybe didn't figure it out until they're 40 or 50 years old. And by then they have lesser time to, apply it and compete in the marketplace. So I see a future that young people are going to compete in the marketplace together in teams, and we're doing a lot to serve that audience, as you alluded to, as the future of the trades. And if we can do that, then we are in fact improving the trades for good, and that's our mission. So whether you're a business owner who has a young kid in your home and you envision them taking over the business one day, you're never going to have enough time to teach them everything that they need to know. You may not know everything you need to teach them in the first place. We want to bring them in. We want to help, support them in the growth so that they can take over your business one day and run it with excellence, right? As the standard. And you can go to soebluecollar.org to check out our programs for any young person who's considering the trades. And it is an alternative to a 4-year degree that's probably going to give you a lot of theory, or a trade school that's going to teach you with your hands. And you're going to have a better opportunity ahead by learning this earlier on in your life.
Yeah, my nephew just spent the summer with us. We just got back from Costa Rica. And he asked me, what do I have to do to go into business with you? And I say, it's not the college. I think you should learn a trade or go to learn about trade management, and then I'll invest in you. But that would be the best thing versus a 4-year degree, because it's you need to learn how to apply it, not principles, but application. So I love the fact you're targeting the youth. I love the fact you can impact a part of civilization that AI is never going to take over completely, right? And it's and that's what we really need right now is skilled tradespeople and skilled business owners to run it. Love it. And then obviously the last but not least, the core company. I know you gave some of the other websites. How do people find you personally?
Yeah.
If they want
so they can find me on LinkedIn, Johnny Neal. They can find me on Twitter at realdeal_jneal. And they can send me an email, jneal@contractornation.com.
Perfect. And for those of you watching, that'll be on the description below. You'll be able to find those social links and how to reach them. So thanks again, Johnny. I appreciate the time. I feel like we could have probably gone another hour, man. You have a wealth of knowledge. So thanks for wealth of knowledge. Thanks for sharing with me. Appreciate you.
Certainly. Thank you for having me.